Hi, my name's Dana.
Hi, my name is Dua.
Hi, my name's Lua.
Hi, my name's Noor, and let's talk about vaccine nationalism.
We're all students of year 11 studying in the United Arab Emirates, and we just wanted to make a podcast raising awareness for issues that aren't talked about as much or bringing a new perspective to issues that are talked about. So we want to kind of make people talk about things. That's why it's called Let's Talk About It.
So before we start, I think we should define what vaccine nationalism is. So vaccine nationalism is when a country prioritizes its own vaccine needs, but how does this phenomena affect the rest of the world?
So I want to start off with some statistics that I found while researching, and I found that a few a few high income countries along with some middle income countries um fl- have already purchased around 3.8 billion doses of the vaccine, which which I'll show a map later on, but some of the African countries along with some of Asian countries don't have any vaccines. So them of only a couple countries having 3.8 billion doses can be detrimental to the other countries' vaccine, like how many vaccines they have. They're not willing to distribute them around the world.
And a well endowed professor of economics finance at the University of Maryland called Neil Moskowitz said that no economy can fully recover until we have global equitable access to vaccines, therapeutics, and diagnostics, which also shows how limiting the supply of vaccines to your own country can be economically detrimental, and how there is no full winners or losers in this situation. It's either we all win or we all lose, and we have to fight this battle together, which also goes hand in hand, I guess.
Um, I was gonna say, I understand countries securing vaccines for their populations, but there are some high income countries in the Americas, like the North America, that have secured more vaccines than their population needs. So I think it was something like around the lines of like they can vaccinate their population twice, whilst some countries won't even get their first doses until 2021, 2022. And this is very detrimental, as Donna and Nora already said, is very detrimental to the world's economy, because if one country, we all can't be like all of our economies can't be developing at the same time. We all either flourish or we are all in dire situations.
Yeah, and like new mutations, if some countries like how we were talking about developing countries are the ones that aren't getting the vaccines right now, they will start developing mutations of COVID-19, and that just makes it worse, and then new vaccines have to be developed, and it'll just be this ongoing cycle. And I was reading this article from CNN, and all the references that we're using today will be linked in the description. So this article was about COVID-19 vaccines in Malawi, and many district hospitals have started running out of oxygen. And right now it's the second wave of COVID-19 in Malawi. The vaccination plan for Malawi um, with COVAX, the World Health Organization's facility to help poorer countries with COVID-19 vaccines. Their vaccination plan for Malawi is for them to receive vaccines by the end of February. And a lot of the frontline workers aren't expecting it to actually come in time, because they just realize that that's just how it is for their country and what it will be like, which is really sad. Honestly, it's really sad.
That's super depressing.
Yeah.
I want to share a map that I found that I think is very beneficial to back up our point. So the darker the areas are, the more vaccines per 100 people that the country has. So as you can see, America has a lot. Canada is doing well off. Um, some countries in South America are also doing sort of well, but then some of these aren't. Africa is pretty much has no vaccines except for Morocco has a few, Algeria has a few, and Egypt. Whilst the European countries, as we expected, most of them have a lot of vaccines, and Russia has some, along with China, obviously India, and then again, some of these Asian countries don't, and some of these Asian countries don't. Australia, this confuses me. If any of you can, Australia is a country that's well off. However, they do not have any vaccines, so that's kind of interesting because they don't even want the vaccine, which is kind of funny, but also kind of interesting.
No, sorry, I think it might be just because they just don't have data from that place. Like, it's not necessarily that they don't have any vaccines, because I was reading about articles and they have vaccines and they're free in Australia and all of that, but they just might not have data from it. So they either might not have any data or they just don't have any vaccines. So just keep that in mind.
Australia is dying from corona right now. They did a really good job at.
They did really well. I was watching this we were watching this tennis match on TV and they were in stadiums not wearing any masks, not social distancing, and they're just there. We were like, it literally is like back to normal. They're not even concerned about it. It doesn't even affect them anymore, which is cool to see, and it gives all of us some hope, I think, at least.
Yeah, it's a good control. The way she managed. I mean, the way Australia and New Zealand are managing the entire situation is truly inspiring for all nations. But I would also like to show a map which illustrates, if you guys will, which illustrates the time where the vaccination coverage will be reached. So as you can see over here, that in underdeveloped economies such as Africa, the vaccine coverage will not be achieved until early 2023, which is like bizarre to me because it's 2 years from now. And countries such as the United States and Russia and Britain, like all these nations, they're well-developed nations, I guess. And only 37 of the nations will be able to be COVID free by the end of this year, which is truly sad, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I would like to quote from the WHO chief. I can't pronounce his name. Tedros. Yeah. So the WHO chief, he said, this is a direct quote from him. It would also lead, so talking about vaccine nationalism here, it would also lead to a prolonged pandemic as only a small number of countries would get most of the supply. And this is the interesting part. Vaccine nationalism only helps the virus. By prioritizing your own country, you might be vaccinating the population, but the efforts in trying to eradicate the virus from the whole world, it does nothing. And in fact, it only helps the virus, as Lois said, with the mutations and all that, and it just allows it to spread. So, yeah.
Like you can see in South Africa how there's already a new mutation there that is widely spread to other nations.
I have a point that I found in while I was reading papers about vaccine nationalism, and I'm pretty sure our guest later will be touching upon this concept. And in 2009, when it was the N1H1 pandemic, is it N1H1? Yeah. In the H1N1 pandemic, by the time, and this is a straight quote, in 2009, by the time developed countries moved to donate vaccine doses to developing countries, the worst of the pandemic had passed and no second wave was expected. So you can imagine how long it took for these countries to even get the vaccine, that they didn't even need it anymore. It was practically pointless to give it to them at that point because they didn't find use for it.
So I was initially reading about how another form of vaccine nationalism is this race on which country will produce the most effective and most widespread vaccine that is world renownedly known. I was just going to say how taking that and how making this battle a race is not initially the way to go. However, I understand as to why we need to like produce the supply like as fast as we can. However, this race that this getting the title should not be the goal, which I believe, and which many organizations such as the WHO kind of believe that that's where some big pharma companies and some nations are going for, is the title when it should be the lives. Yeah.
Okay, so before they move into COVAX, I just want to say when I first started reading about vaccine nationalism, it really reminded me of the Cold War because I did that in history and the space race, and it sounds identical except they wanted to go to space and now we want vaccines. So
yeah,
they say history repeats itself, folks. It's a true quote.
yeah. Okay, so I think now is a good time to introduce what COVAX actually is, because I think I touched on it like once or something. So I'll introduce it like what it actually is. So COVAX is an abbreviated version for COVID-19 vaccines global access, and it was founded by the World Health Organization, the European Commission, and the government of France. And it's a part of one of the 3 pillars of the Access to COVID-19 Tools, or ACT. So the aim, as quoted from the official website, is to work for global equitable access to COVID-19 vaccines. And it claims to offer doses for at least 20% of the country's population, diverse and actively managed portfolio of vaccines delivered as soon as they are available, and the acute phase of the pandemic, and to rebuild economies. There will be videos and websites linked below if you want to learn more about COVAX. But the way that they distribute the doses of vaccines are in proportion to the population size. So, yeah.
Yeah, so there are going to be like 92 countries that are eligible for COVAX's plan, which is basically if the country is a developing economy and maybe can't afford to provide vaccines for their entire population. I know for Morocco, COVAX is going to be sending 1.8 million AstraZeneca vaccines, which personally I'm very into. I like that a lot. And I don't know about you guys. I don't know about your countries. But yeah, I think COVAX is such a good idea. And I know that it can do this because of collaboration between 190 governments. So I don't know, that kind of shows collaboration over competition, y'all. Like, it's the only way that we're going to be able to beat this. I don't.
They're like working together, and it's like really nice to see. And all new countries are joining again. I think the US is joining, has a plan to join. Like, it's really good to see them starting to work together and realize, hey, we need to work together for this pandemic to actually end, you know?
Yeah.
Mm.
Right.
It's not even okay. So there's something I wanna kind of talk about, which it's kind of steering it a little bit off topic, but also everyone that's watching this, I want you to know how important it is for not only countries to be working together, but people to be working together. Like the amount of times I've gone out and seen people not wearing masks or people not wanting to take the vaccine. I understand everyone's point of like everyone can have a point of view, but also work together to end, because I think all of us can agree that we all want everything to go back to normal as it can possibly be. So I appreciate countries working together, but also individuals working for the community is very important.
Little word
That
of
was
advice
off
from us.
topic. Back on track. Back on track.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's see. Oh, this is a cool statistic, if I may. According to a research nonprofit called RAND Europe, as long as the virus isn't under control, it will cost the world $1.2 trillion per year. I don't think people understand how much money that is, but $1.2 trillion for every year that the virus isn't under control.
Exactly.
So, I mean,
and rich like economies that are flourishing right now think that if they preserve their own nations that they're going to be well off, but that's not the case. I mean, the US could lose over 9.2 trillion if governments fail to contain the pandemic, basically. I mean,
Yeah.
it's just, oh, sorry, not the US, the world. My bad. The world. The world, okay.
Guys, something controversial that someone said. We all love to see it. Okay, what did someone say about the vaccines and how did they add to vaccine nationalism? So this guy called Peter Marks spoke about vaccine nationalism. I think it was in a conference. So who is he? He's the director of the US Food and Drug Administration, so the FDA. And he also, I think, works at or is associated with the Center for Biologics Evaluation and Research. So he said, and I quote, every country, though we say we're working together, there's always a little bit behind that we're going to make sure that our own are taken care of first. So he said he also said it's not actually all that big of a problem because ultimately this is a global problem that we all have to address. And then he took back his first statement about countries taking care of their own first after a bunch of people went after him and said, you're wrong, you shouldn't be doing that. So yes.
I feel like people in that position say it out of privilege. Living in economies that are well developed, it's quite unknown. Like you wouldn't know what's going on in underdeveloped economies, which is why we're like all of us are fairly aware of that because where we come from, there's a mass shortage of vaccines, you know? So I feel like
imagine living in like a European country that's like vaccinating all of its citizens and has enough vaccines for everyone and being like, guys, vaccine nationalism, it's not that big of a, like, come on.
I know all three of you. Like Noor's from India, Dua's Moroccan, Lua's. I don't want to. Lua, cut this out.
Where is Lua?
Where am I from, Dada?
Yeah. I wanted to say that, but I didn't want to get it wrong. Okay, I'm sorry. Okay, so I'll repeat that. Okay, so Noor's Indian, Lua's Moroccan, Lua's Ugandan, Iranian, and Ugandan. So, and I'm like half European and half Jordanian, but then my European is Romania, and Romania isn't like part of the wealthier European countries that you might think of. A lot of people haven't even heard of Romania. Like we're still behind. So we don't have vaccines. Like I see how it's affecting everyone, and they can't. When the pandemic first started, some of the kids couldn't do online learning because they didn't have technology. They didn't have laptops. They couldn't even afford to do that. Like I'm sure the rest of you can comment on this. Some countries don't even have the privilege of going online. Like they can't do that. So then I think vaccines are more worthy they're more important to give to them than anything. They need to go to school. They need to get an education. No?
Yeah, my dad was telling me, so he pays for my cousin's tuition fees for school. And right now, since they don't use technology at school, they're not doing any school right now. Because they have to be at home, they don't have any way to be taught this kind of stuff because they don't have the things that developed countries have. So
yeah. And that could show how it's like affecting future generations by affecting their education. Mm-hmm. You know, older generations, of course, are getting affected. However, this kind of also has an impact on the younger ones. And I feel like when you prioritize vaccines, it should mainly be on people who are most at risk for it, rather than which country or economy is thriving the most, because it's turning a global, it's turning this pandemic situation a public health issue. No, sorry. It's a public health issue that is turning into a rich and poor situation, I guess, if we look at it that way. And it shouldn't be, you know? We're all equal. We're all one in this. Every single life matters in like public health and all that, you know, in terms of that.
I wanted to say, like, there are some countries that are like vaccinating just like their general population, which isn't like a bad thing, right? Like, obviously, I'm not against that. But then there are also some countries that are completely being ruined by COVID. You know, their what's called their healthcare system can't take it, and the what are they, like, the doctors? There's like a formal word for it. The doctors, the nurses, the
Paramedics. Frontline workers.
Frontline workers. Yes, the frontline workers aren't being vaccinated. So like people in like other like populations are like vaccinating like teenagers, 16-year-olds, 17-year-olds, which has been shown that it doesn't like affect us as much. Like next to like, you know, frontline workers that are directly exposed to COVID, but they can't get vaccinated because their country can't afford it. And that's really depressing. That is super depressing.
Yeah.
So
And I just want to take a moment to like, you know, like applaud the frontline workers that are working so hard right now.
Let's just take a moment.
Let's just take
a moment of silence.
Yeah.
Just to reflect.
Well, I think on that note, we will move on to the interview portion of this podcast episode. So
we have a professional, someone who actually knows what they're talking about.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, everybody, and welcome to this fantastic podcast organized by the very proactive ladies from Australia International School. My name is Michael. Other people call me Mikhail, Otim. I teach at the University of Sharjah, and I also teach in another university on volunteer basis in Africa. It's called Nexus International. My qualifications include a PhD in public health, specializing in what we call economics of health. So my area is mainly public health, and within public health, one of the key issues is the looking after the health of the population. Today, our topic is vaccine nationalism. What are the challenges and opportunities in the case of public health? The outline involves an introduction and some examples, and we'll give the context of the whole chat tonight. Then we'll talk about the challenges and opportunities before we conclude. So it will be a fairly brief talk. Don't worry, you'll have time to make your cup of tea. The question is, what is a vaccine? And what is nationalism? A vaccine is a medication that has been created to stimulate your body and mimic the embedding illness so that your body can produce what we call antibodies to fight that illness. In our conversation tonight, it is the coronavirus. So the vaccine is expected to mimic the the coronavirus, it's in principle supposed to be given to somebody who is healthy, and the body makes the antibodies, and the antibodies hang around the gates, and when they see the coronavirus walking by, they attack. Now, there is a big difference between a vaccine and a medication, the ordinary medication for treatment. Medication for treatment is once you have the virus in you and it has converted itself into an illness, then we treat that illness to kill the virus or slow it down, whatever the case, and you are better. But for the vaccine stimulates your body, arms your body, teaches your body to be strong and fight the coronavirus next time it comes. What is nationalism? Nationalism is this passion for your country. It's a beautiful concept that we even sacrifice everything for our country. Sometimes we overdo it to an extent that instead of helping, it's destroying, it's creating trouble for the country. So that is partly where this conversation is hinged on. UAE has done a fantastic job in preventing people from contracting the illness, allowing the virus to get into them, and followed all the protocols that the WHO and other researchers has come up with, such as social distancing, wearing masks, improving our etiquette. Make sure when you cough, you don't cough like a villager. Cough like, the sophisticated human beings you are. So all these are things that the government has put in place. Now, what is interesting is that with health in general, nobody cares about you. You care for yourself, and you go to see the doctor. When you go to see the doctor will treat you. But when it comes to the infectious diseases, such as coronavirus, if you have the virus, you are going to affect people's lives. As long as your illness, as long as what you do is affecting other human beings, then you lose that total freedom you have of your own. And that's where we have, governments have what we call the public health law. When the government says from tomorrow, no walking around, no walking outside in the dark, you must obey. The government has the law. It has been enacted, and it is supposed to be followed. Now, within nationalism, it has got that flavor of politics. You're so passionate about your country that you're willing to do anything for it. Now, in the case of vaccine nationalism, we are all thinking about our country. We don't care about other human beings, whether they can afford to have a vaccine, or they are going to hurt themselves. we don't care. We will keep the vaccine for ourselves. Even to an extent, some people argue that we should store the vaccine in case things get worse tomorrow. And yet we know that there are some countries or some human beings who cannot afford um, to buy the vaccine for their people. Now, in such a case, the World Health Organization, WHO, and other countries, other nations, other groups came together. They are aware of that sort of nationalism. And they got together and said, hey, what we are going to do, we are going to set up a fund. We are going to set up a basket of vaccines for those who cannot afford themselves. Because whether you like it or not, if we all have the vaccine in UAE, we cannot close our borders because we're healthy. In fact, we want to do business, and business means dealing with other human beings from other countries, which means we're exposing ourselves to the virus. And those people whom we are dealing with are feeling the pinch, they are feeling the trouble of the virus, that it may become a backlash. It may turn back and people avoid coming to the UAE because the UAE was so selfish. They didn't share with them the vaccine. But we are like UAE is a very, very generous country. The human beings in the UAE are very generous. Whenever the countries are in trouble, whatever form of trouble, we always collect whatever we can collect to help them. And the government of UAE has promised to help developing countries with vaccines. So that's why we have COVAX. COVAX is a program developed by WHO and other countries like the European Union and others to make sure they provide vaccines to poor countries, countries that are not able to afford the problem. Now, the key for our conversation, the key issue here is coronavirus. Coronavirus, as we know, like most viruses, it's trouble. There is no treatment for viruses. So the best we can do is we can fight the virus ourselves, and the only way we can fight the virus is to build our immunity. The question then is how should we build our immunity to fight the coronavirus? In UAE, this data may be outdated by a few days. This was as of the 12th of February. The total cases were about 100 million. The total deaths were about 2.4 million. As you know, the population is about 8 billion human beings. So you can imagine how many human beings will require vaccines. And that's why we have so many companies now very actively trying to produce different types of vaccines. Some of these include the Oxford vaccine or AstraZeneca. And this one has changed the schedule from 80 million to 31 million doses to be able to cover the European Union as well. And when you go to the third world countries, you find that AstraZeneca is one of the best, one of the most the easiest vaccines to use because number one, it doesn't require refrigeration. You can transport it in room temperature. Yet most of the vaccines, the temperatures are in negatives, and really cold. So you go to Africa, where will you get the trucks that are refrigerated? So all those problems become challenges for transporting and distributing the vaccine. UAE has another vaccine. As I know, there are about three vaccines. Sinopharm, Pfizer. What's the third one? I can't remember the third one. But
I'm only aware of the first two. I apologize. But yes, I've heard of AstraZeneca as well. But yes, Pfizer,
yes. Yeah. So UAE is trying to get as many vaccines as we can from different sources, because the other challenge with the vaccines, especially for corona, is that because corona had a very big impact on people's health, on families, it also had a big impact on the rest of the sectors: education, business, construction, and so on. So because of that, and UAE being very proactive, is lining up as many vaccine makers as there can be. The trouble with the existing vaccines at the moment is that the vaccines haven't been tested for a long time, because the vaccine is developed in the laboratory and we find that it works. And that's what we call efficacy. It means it works in perfect conditions in the laboratory. And once we do that, we then try it on human beings in order to test for the toxicity and so on and so on. Is it safe to use, or does it cause other problems in health? Then we go to level 2 of the clinical trial in order to tell how it functions in real life. Because not only is it fighting the coronavirus, it's also fighting the ordinary flus. It's also fighting the MERS virus, and it's fighting other things. It's also fighting the chili. You know, some of us eat food which is hot. It's fighting all sorts of things in real life. The question is will it still function as it did in the lab? So that's what we call effectiveness. Now, it requires time, and that's why some people are resistant to taking the virus, because, you know, we don't know what side effects. We might become monkeys, we might all become Chinese, we might all become British, or even become rabbits, you know. We don't know. So that's what some people think. I like the one of becoming a Chinese, because then I don't have to pay money to sit there and speak Mandarin. I can just begin speaking Mandarin, and life is fantastic, you know. So that is some of the examples. Now, why do we bother about vaccines? The context is that the world is small. The world has become so small that you can run from one side of the planet to the other within hours. Now, it has become so small that we are now going into, we are looking for distance. We are going to space. Last week we landed on the moon, on Mars. And a lot of other aircrafts have been sent and have gone to the periphery of the universe to, try to find what the world is. The world is so small, and we are beginning to recognize the fact that the Earth is just one small country, and we, the human beings, are its citizens. If we don't look after each other, it will come to bite us, because we cannot survive in UAE when Saudi Arabia, Yemen, and so on is full of the virus. So we have to extend a hand and help them and make life easier and help these human beings. We get pleasure by the fact that they've accepted help from us is a reward to us. It makes us feel good, So that is the context of going on, for vaccines. But still, we have a group of human beings who think nationalism, it's only them who have the right to have the vaccine. The ones who make the vaccine are looking for money. They don't care about who buys, who takes, who gets, who doesn't. All they want is profit. But you and I will not sleep well when we know that Dua is not feeling well. Lua's parents have a virus, and they don't have a way of getting out of it. We feel the pain because of empathy. Empathy is growing bigger and bigger by the night. So that's the context for these, for condemning the nationalism as far as the vaccines are concerned. Within this, the fundamental things that drive this nationalism is selfishness. That feeling of only me syndrome. Everybody can go hang themselves. I want it, I should have it, I am going to be, it's me, look at me. That is the problem. There is also that me syndrome becomes a collective for that identity or that group of people. So much that it slows, it generates inequities in society. It generates racism. It generates the effort to make other people different so that we don't share what we have with them. It slows down world unity. It slows down world business, world trade. Last year, we were going to have a big thing in UAE in 2020. We're going to have a big expo. And UAE went through a lot of planning and paying and everything to organize that event to take place. Why? They were not going to bring camels to attend the expo. It was human beings from other countries whom they were counting on coming to attend so that it generates business, it generates It revives the economy. But because of this coronavirus, all that was put aside and joined the forces with the rest of the world to fight it. Yes, we would like to say we are more healthy than the other group of people. Okay, fantastic. But we are more healthy means we are all healthy, except that we are a little ahead of the others. We don't get any benefit for us to be healthy when the other side or the other group of people are getting worse. It undermines this selfishness, this nationalism, undermines the world efforts at implementing COVAX. Do we really want to be one country which is healthy or has the vaccines while the rest of the world doesn't? I don't think so, because there is that empathy, that thing in us as human beings, which wants to see that our friends, even people we don't know, are healthy. Within these challenges, we can see opportunities for ourselves. The weaknesses can be found in the nationalism, so as to fix this problem. We can stop and remember that those people who are missing out on the vaccine are human beings. They feel the pain, they love us, they would love their families, they have their children, they have their, they are the very ones who make the economy, make the world move. They are the ones who make the world rotate. They are no different from us. So that's an opportunity. It reminds us, because what happens tomorrow if something else comes up and they have a solution? Shall we be happy if they also become nationalistic and refuse to give us? Go back to history. Long time ago, we had a Spanish flu. It killed millions of human beings, And then we had, and then even today, we still have other viruses that kill children. We have poliomyelitis. We have smallpox. We have whooping cough, and so many others, measles. If they decide to say, no, Uganda, you're not getting our vaccines. These are our vaccines that we're storing for our friends and for our people. I'll feel the pain because those children in Uganda need these vaccines more than some children somewhere, So that becomes an opportunity for empathy, for donations, for collaborations, for working together. And that will help make us realize that there is something called globalization. It's not bad after all. If only we can remove these obstacles of selfishness and so on, we will have a better place to live in. Okay? Whatever we do, whatever we pray, whatever we fight, globalization is inevitable. The world is becoming smaller and smaller and smaller. We cannot afford to leave one section of society without vaccines. Otherwise, the virus will come back. And when it comes back, it's not going to come back as a coronavirus 2. it will come in a different version. We already seen examples. South Africa, the virus has mutated, you know. Britain, the virus has mutated. Now, if we are going to be selfish and not help, you know, a country like, you know, like Sudan, like Argentina, the virus will mutate. And when it mutates, it normally mutates for the better of its own, or for the better of itself, for its own survival, not for us to get better, for us to kill it easily. That is the challenge. We don't want that. I'm sure you people, you may have heard of a little insect called a mosquito. It's a very tiny little insect, but it kills more human beings than anybody else, than anything else, especially children, you know. And the trouble is, the medications which are used for treating that malaria, the malaria is becoming resistant. The malaria is developing, protecting itself. And by so doing, we get in more trouble than what it was. So unless we all get up and join hands and realize we are all human beings, we deserve to fight this virus as a team, we will not succeed. We will not think that we will survive as one section and another section will perish. For that reason, vaccine nationalism, I am boldly stating that it's synonymous to racism, because people in one country are hanging onto the virus, onto the vaccine, even when they don't need it, a vaccine which would help other human beings to get better. And that is what racism is all about. You hang on to the resources, to hang on to things when there are people, when there are other people who need it, and you don't want to give them for no reason at all, just because we look different. We should fight vaccine nationalism with all we have, because if all people do not have access to these vaccines, the virus will come back. And when it comes back, God help us. And knowing what we are, knowing that we are very clever, we never thought we would team up and go in and put a station in the sky. The very enemies, the US, China, Russia, and others, united and built a space station together. We are all running to the Mars. We run to the moon, we're running to Mars. That is a collaboration. We know we cannot do it on our own. And because of that, vaccine nationalism is futile. Because we are way more advanced, clever, and we are full of empathy, that we shall join forces and fight vaccine nationalism. Thank you for listening to me. Any questions?
So my first question is, will the countries who participate in vaccine nationalism have an advantage in terms of their local economy? So less unemployment, their people can afford to pay rent or pay for food, etc. Or are they still going to struggle like other countries who are fighting the virus?
Thank you for that question. It's a very excellent question. It goes to the foundation of our conversation. In the short run, for 2 days, for 1 week, they will think they will be better off. But they will not. You know why? Because the world is so small that nobody grows food for itself. We grow food and we share with the rest of the world. You find that even their industries, if their industries are growing at, let's say let's say dates. UAE produces dates. And if we are better off with dates, can we finish all the dates from the UAE? No. We will have to export those dates, we'll package them, we'll store them, and sell to other people. And if those people don't have money, if they are in trouble, there is no way they will survive. We drive cars made in America, cars made in China, cars made in Jupiter. They, in a very short run, in the first week, they think they will be okay, but they will run out of what they need. And they will be back to zero, they will be back to square one.
So, just as a follow-up to that question, I just thought about this now. So New Zealand has pretty much closed off its borders, right? They combated the virus completely, but they're closed off. How are they still, surviving economically, because still the whole world is, struggling from this virus, but they're still, surviving as a country. So how does that even happen?
Two things. Number one, it has closed off as a measure to prevent the spread of the virus coming in and so on, which is understandable and everybody can accept it. Two, if it closes off because it's similar to nationalism, vaccine nationalism, then it is in trouble. Because at this point in time, when it has closed because it is preventing itself, it can import food. Boats can bring food, boats can bring clothes, boats can bring, oil can bring, it doesn't require many passengers. That is okay. But when it becomes, the selfish, mean streak that, we human beings tend to have, that we should have, they shouldn't have, they will retaliate. And when they retaliate, they will run out of what they need. New Zealand is not at the moment thinking of economic growth or wealth. It's thinking of the health, the survival of the population. That's the excuse it has to survive. It has.
Okay. So my second question is thinking back to the H1N1 virus in 2009 and the vaccine nationalism that also occurred then. I'm pretty sure the recession happened in 2009, right? Is that correct?
Yes.
So did the H1N1 vaccine nationalism have an impact in the economy to recover? Okay.
It did. It contributed significantly. It contributed, which is exactly what is happening now. The world is in a recession. We haven't yet gone to vaccine nationalism. We are suffering because of the impact of the virus. Now, once we go to that next step of nationalism, then China will be screaming, Europe, Japan will be screaming, the US will be screaming, Russia will be screaming, Arabia will be screaming. It won't help anybody. And look at what happened. If you remember, when this virus came, what happened to the stock market? You know, where they sell shares of those big companies. The stock market crashed. People lost money. People who had bought shares and stored a lot of money lost the money. So just like what happened with the H1N1 and contributed by vaccine nationalism, if this happens again, if we did not learn anything last time, the economy will even get worse, because right now, the economy is so bad. It's so there's unemployment. It's people are suffering. People are suffering.
Okay. My third question is, do you believe, so COVAX's plan is to vaccinate 20% of the world's population, right? Especially countries that have developing economies. Do you believe that COVAX's plan is going to make any major improvements in the economy?
Yes, I have no doubt about that. Because of the resilience and the determination of human beings like you. It's people like you who will tell the world, give COVAX a chance. Because we've estimated about 20% of the populations won't be able to, look after themselves.
Yeah.
Number two, the vaccine manufacturers, this time round, I have so many. It's not just Russia is making one, China is making one, the UK is making one, the US is making so many, Australia is making. So you find that it will become a business, and that will boost, will remind us that we need to do business if we are healthy.
So my fourth question is, so Rand Europe predicts that as long as the virus isn't under control, it'll cost the world $1.2 trillion per year. Do you think this is an accurate prediction?
I haven't seen the model he used for predicting, but I wouldn't disagree with him. I would even think he's being conservative, because if you just sit and reflect, look at UAE. That's the best we know, right? Have you been to Muela?
Muela, yeah.
Do you remember that all those tall buildings in Muela, the ground floor used to be shops? Either shops for, food, shops for the arts and crafts and nails or what, but they're all empty. You go to Al-Nada, same thing. You go to Dubai, same thing. People are scared. People don't have enough. There are very many people without jobs. Transport. The transport sector is down. And the transport sector, the best example I give is the Emirates. The Emirates, all the planes are lying down. That's just that. We've not looked at other sectors. To me, the coronavirus is costing the world economy more than what has been estimated. And when you talk about that, I'm developing a protocol currently to estimate economic impact of coronavirus on UAE economy. So maybe in the near future you'll hear what my estimates are for UAE economy. But I think it's an underestimate.
Yeah, okay. So what will this do? So what will vaccine nationalism do to the relationships between the developed and developing countries? Will this impact that relationship in any way?
Yes, it will. It will impact the relationships because most developing countries rely on developed countries. The developed countries, the well-off countries are using poor countries to do their dirty work, to do their dirty jobs. And because of that, they are going to try to look so nice to them by giving them, a few packets of vaccine and tell them if you do A, B, C, D, we'll give you more vaccines. That has been the history. That is the history of selfishness, the history of racism. It thrives on you having and the other one not having.
Okay, well, we already got your answer to this from your presentation, but since it's the last question on the list, I'm just gonna ask it. So finally, what do you think the approach should be, country or planet?
I think the approach, given how selfish we are, although we have every opportunity not to be selfish, we need to strengthen the power of WHO, and we need to strengthen the power of those organizations that are working with WHO to help the economies. Look at it this way. Everybody trusts what the WHO says. And they have a reason to trust WHO, because WHO is not taking sides. WHO is a world inclusive organization which is looking after everybody. If we can strengthen the WHO and strengthen the United Nations, because WHO is an arm, is a UN agent, we will be able to avoid vaccine nationalism. That does not stop us, you, me, one person at a time, to change the attitudes of the world.
When you brought up the points on, like, when you specifically mentioned what was getting affected, such as the Al Nahda situation, where my mom used to, like, there were tailor shops where my mom used to, like, embroider her, like, my clothes and stuff, and those are being shut down. And I just didn't realize the impact COVID really had. And yes, they're being completely conservative about how much money can be lost. And my dad works in Emirates as well, and every day after he comes back from our work, when we are having dinner, Emirates is like going into this loss, that loss. It's just this entire thing where everyone's put in such a stressful situation, but we can only fight back if we fight back together, because it's not about one country exactly. It's about all of us, because it's kind of like a multiplier effect. If one person changes their mentality, it duplicates, I guess.
Yes. That is exactly, thank you for summarizing our conversation. as it was pointed out, let me put on my glasses. Dua, when Dua said that what will happen to the world? Can we change the world? Are we underestimating? Is that loss in the economy accurate? It's a big problem. We only see we are not seeing how much impact it is, and the way you put it exactly in such a clear way. Every little thing, offices, education, people can't even go to, I don't know, did any of you who goes to the global village, are there still human beings in the global village? It's trouble. People are, even those who have the money are scared to spend the money.
Exactly. Like when you see like developed countries struggling, you have no idea the impact that might be having on the underdeveloped countries. Like if they're struggling, you just adding on more strain onto underdeveloped countries, which is why, our priorities should be in a sense like evened out. However, the underdeveloped countries need the most attention because they were already struggling from the start. So, yeah.
That's right. But working together and going for one heart at a time, one human being at a time, we will be able to change this crazy world. And I trust you girls, you are the champions of the future.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're inspired from people like you.
Thank you. Thank you.
In order to better the world, yes.
Take care. Have a good evening.
You too, sir. Again, thank you so much for your time. We truly appreciate it. Your insight was very meaningful and added a lot of questions and conversation. So thank you.
Thank you guys so much for listening or watching. We hope you enjoyed. The references to everything we used will be in the description, as well as donations you can donate to and places to learn more about vaccines and vaccine nationalism and all of that good stuff. Social media will also be in the description. Please follow us. It would help us a lot so that we can share this with everybody that we possibly can, because these issues are really important to talk about. And yeah, so thank you guys.
If you know anyone that will want to listen to it as well, share it with them, or tell them to watch it, because we all think it's really important to discuss these issues.
Yeah. Bye.
Stay tuned, guys. Bye.